was
And
gonna
I
say,
will definitely forget if I don't do it now.
yeah. She said that y'all had a hellacious night the other night.
Oh, you name it. It started with during third period, I got an email from OnStar saying I had a flat tire.
Oh no.
Yeah, and I was going to drive home so I could use this computer, which gives me less trouble. I'm like, okay, that's not going to work. Fine, because it's 4 o'clock. And I'm like, I'll just use this one. And one of them, I can't use the Pear Deck on because I can only use my John Carroll email, and my Pear Deck is set up for a different one. And then the other one wouldn't even let me open Zoom at all. But that's fine because Tara was going to open it. But I ended up, my husband switched cars and I drove home. So that's fine. When I get home, I see I have a text from her saying her computer crashed. Like,
Oh
that's
Lord.
okay. I can open everything on my computer now that I'm home. For the first time in this entire year, when I tried to open Zoom, it said, you need a passcode. It's like, no, I tested it this weekend and it was fine. So I couldn't get in. So we had to get Rhonda to do that. And then that it wouldn't let me open the Pear Deck because it said I didn't have access. So I managed to get into Zoom and get it open. And then Tara got the Pear Deck open. It was like everything that could have gone wrong basically did. But we started probably 2 or 3 minutes late, something like that. We totally got done.
Not bad. That's good.
We got through everything. We finished on time and got through everything. And so it was just one of those, it got so ridiculous that it became funny. At first, I was very, very frustrated when my tire was flat. I went outside to look at it. And it's like, yeah, your satellite is right. My tire is flat.
Yeah.
But then it's just like literally everything that could happen did. So life goes on. There are much, much worse things that can happen. Like I don't know if you saw the story. I've never seen the movie Snakes on a Plane, nor do I ever intend to. But
yes,
that did you hear that it happened?
No.
That this pilot, I guess I missed the first part of the story, but sometime during the flight, he discovered there was a cobra, like at his feet. The pilot discovered that. He's just like, I need to land as soon as possible. He calls air traffic. And I heard the end of the story today. They never found it.
Oh, no.
So I don't know where it is. I need to check to see where he landed. I hope it wasn't in Birmingham because I don't like snakes.
Nope, I don't do snakes either. So we still have no internet at work. We have no end in sight of when it might be.
Wow. I saw the story about the ransomware thing over spring break, and I thought, okay, well, that was dumb to do it over spring break because schools are not as vulnerable then. I didn't realize that it wasn't going to be back up.
Yeah. So they claim that it could take another 3 weeks to get us completely operational again.
Wow. That's almost the end of the school year.
I know. And I'm like, okay, y'all don't want us using hotspots at work. And you've been hesitant to tell us to grade things at home. So what are we going to do about inputting grades,
Wow. That's a mess.
Yeah.
I got kicked out of my room today because of testing. And so I couldn't use technology because I was in somebody else's room and they stayed in the room. And at some point I had a shared room. So I'm like, fine, I'll go low tech, but I can do that for 1 day.
Yeah.
Don't want to do it for 4 weeks.
Yeah. So it's pretty bad. I don't know what we're going to do. I'm very like, okay, guys,
And I think that's a big fat, not my fault. I'm going to do what I can to get by, but
yep.
I do what I can do.
Yep. And that's where I am. I do what I can. But it gets super frustrating a lot because you can't access your documents, and if you forget to, like today I forgot to print something before I went to work, and then I couldn't access it.
Yeah. Mm.
So
The first day after spring break, I got there pretty early because I get there pretty early almost every day, but I needed to print out this one thing and copy it for my students. Because the Friday before spring break, I'm just like, no, I need a break. It took me more than 35 minutes to get the computer booted up and to print it because the computers are so ancient. But I got it. Now, why is the one right behind you upside down?
that was her tour poster from the Sweetener World Tour. So that was Ariana Grande.
But what was was there a reason why she did it upside down?
Her song on that album was God as a Woman, and it was, like the music video films her upside down multiple, like all throughout. So
it was a story.
Yep. So I'm thinking I'm gonna sit behind not the lady posters again. I don't need. Last time we did this, the kids chat was all about whether or not I was a Swiftie fan.
I remember that.
So, all right, let's see here. I've got the. Hey, quick question. It's in view only. I do have to make a copy of it first, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, that's fine. I can handle that.
For me, it's remember to do the copy part, but I have to keep constantly changing because it'll try to default to a different email, even though I don't have it synced. And that is always my trick with the Pear Deck.
Do you know or have you heard whether or not John Carroll's going to have any openings next year?
I don't. They have an AP Chemistry opening, which
they may have what?
AP Chemistry.
No, I saw that.
I don't think so. There are only 5 of us.
That's
and I mean, I'll let you know if any of them are going, but I don't think so. This was my first year. There's 2 other people. It's their second.
Yeah.
Actually, there's another person who's a first year like me, and then there's the.
I had a really positive screening interview the other day with Meredith Hansen, the director of personnel for Vestavia.
Okay.
So, I know that's where you left, but my situation is terrible. So.
No, I get it. I mean, for me, it was different. I wasn't in a teaching situation. That wasn't quite right, but I was in a situation that was no longer at all right. And so I know you're just looking for something that fits better. I mean, I certainly wouldn't discourage.
Yeah. And then I also have a non-teaching interview next Wednesday for an instructional technology coach position with Alabaster City Schools. So, so it's an area that I love to dabble in, and I've always thought about how fun it might be to get out of the classroom.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely have people in my department that have gotten their library degrees.
All right. I'm good to go.
Seeing this, it's not in present mode. I can see your screen, but it's not presented because I can see you scrolling on the side.
Oh, you know what?
There we go.
Hold on though.
Okay.
How do I do this? It's been a minute. It's not. I haven't opened it in Pear Deck though.
But you didn't do the Pear Deck add-on?
No, I did, and it didn't open. Let me figure that out real quick.
Do you want to go ahead and, well, does that mean you can't invite me? Because if you can invite me, then I can see whether or not it's showing what it's supposed to.
All right. All right, let's see here. Tools, no extensions. Crap. I thought this was gonna be the case. There it is.
Did you do the open Pear Deck add-on and the thing on the side to start
Yeah, but
presenting?
it's not coming up. It's making me re-log in real quick. So frustrating. Log in.
I feel you.
It's making me reauthorize everything. All right, come on.
It didn't just deny you access, so that's good.
Sessions. Open Pear add-on. All right, it's working. All right, it's open. I'm going to start the lesson. I'm going to put it in instructor pace mode. All right, and then I'm going to go back and share. There it is.
Okay. Can you put the co-teacher link in chat?
Yes. Remind me real quick where I find that.
It's always weird for me. Okay, now I'm seeing the part that you don't want me to see on the screen. This is where you're
Okay.
going to do it. This is where you're going to get the co-teacher link. You just want to make sure exactly. And then it'll say invite co-teacher once you click on those three dots.
Invite co-teacher.
You're just going to make sure that this screen is in a different window.
Okay.
The kids can't see each other's answers. That's the one thing that every time I start one, I say, okay, can you see this? And if they say yes, I know I gotta fix my window. Usually if I do
Yes.
separate windows, I just minimize this one and then I maximize it one time to make sure nobody else is seeing it.
All right.
And you can just paste that in the chat and I can get it from there.
It's gonna be really dumb. There we go. All right. Oh my God. So this is the screen that I don't want them to see, right?
Correct.
Okay.
You and I will use that screen to give them feedback, but you don't want them to see it.
All right, that is done there. All right, and this is the correct one. And now chat with Jane.
And anything you put in there now, they're not able to access anyway. They can't see anything come in.
There you go.
Excellent.
All right. Am I still presenting the correct screen?
I'm on a different screen. Hang on just a second. I want to make sure it lets me in. Okay, I'm good. And you are on the screen you want to be sharing.
Okay, perfect.
All right. Are you ready for me to go ahead and let them in?
Yep.
Okay. And if we just want to ask them to let us know if they're teachers, oh, they did that well. I'll write those down. I can put them in the doc.
Good evening. As you come in, please make sure to mute your microphone. Be sure your video feed is showing your image or an avatar. And if you can, name yourself in Zoom with your first name, last initial, and the school that you're with. And if you're a teacher, please put that information in the chat for us. When you're ready to respond to a question, use the raise hand button and we'll call on you. And you can also throw that in the chat as well. As you are also getting settled in tonight, if you would please, also we have a Pear Deck question that you can begin to start answering. And this question tonight is asking you to describe the role of the Supreme Court in shaping our understanding of the Constitution. Oh, wow, this is a really large group tonight we have with us. Lots of. All right, so far it looks like we've got about 17 responses. Again, guys, when you're coming in tonight, if you can, go ahead and answer this question that we have. Describe the role of the Supreme Court in shaping our understanding of the Constitution. So off of our first glance here, looks like a lot of you have studied the court. So that's a really good thing that you have covered the judicial branch in Unit 2. And it looks like that a lot of you have also started to cover some of the cases as well based on your responses. And I'm seeing a lot of really good responses tonight. So good job, students, on that. But the response that we're looking for here in describing the role of the Supreme Court in shaping our understanding of the Constitution is we're looking for you to describe what judicial review is and how the U.S. Supreme Court uses judicial review in shaping our Constitution and our view of it. So tonight we're going to be looking at what are the facts that are required for you to know, and the constitutional issue, the questions about the court cases. We're going to be explaining how a required Supreme Court case relates to a foundational document or to other primary or secondary sources. We're also going to compare the reasoning, the decision, and a majority opinion of a required Supreme Court case to a non-required Supreme Court case. And we're going to explain how required Supreme Court cases apply to scenarios in context. So again, if you have a question throughout the night, please either use the raise hand function or put your question in the chat. All right, so if you have studied Unit 3 at this point, then you are probably well ahead of covering almost all of the required court cases. But a quick review here, we have a handful of required cases. In Unit 1, you should have covered McCullough versus Maryland and United States versus Lopez. Those cases both surround the idea of federalism. In Unit 2, branches, you should have covered Marbury versus Madison, which is the famous case that establishes the court's ability to use judicial review. Baker versus Carr and Shaw versus Reno, both those cases wrap around gerrymandering, legislative redistricting, voting rights. Now, I don't know if all of you have covered or gotten to Unit 5 yet, but if you have made it there, then you have started talking about Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission, which is an important case about federal spending, campaign spending, and how that is tied to speech. We'll talk more about that one later. Unit 3 is the biggest one, civil liberties and civil rights. And one note is there is a case that is missing that has been taken out. And College Board has promised there will be no questions on Roe versus Wade. So the cases there: Engel versus Vitale, Wisconsin v. Yoder, Tinker versus Des Moines, Schnick versus the U.S., New York Times versus the U.S., Gideon versus Wainwright, McDonald versus Chicago, and Brown versus Board of the Education. All right, so what do you need to know about each of these cases? So one thing that you definitely need to know is what is the relevant constitutional clause or principle that the case hinged on. So, the constitutional clause is probably the easiest one to pick up on. For instance, a case dealing with whether a search of someone's house was constitutional would likely hinge upon the right to privacy in the Fourth Amendment, to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures. Now, it could also be a constitutional principle like separation of powers or federalism, right? Because those aren't, a clause. Those are going to be a principle there. It's more likely to be a constitutional clause, but you should pay close attention to the wording of the prompt in Part A of the FRQ. So the FRQ prompt in Part A is going to immediately say whether or not you're looking for needing to identify the constitutional clause or a principle. Next, what are the most relevant facts of the case? So you need to be able to explain the relevant facts about the required SCOTUS case in a couple of sentences. This should be a separate from your comparison. And you should describe relevant facts first. So what facts are relevant? This shouldn't be everything you know about the case. Read the comparison case that you're given, think about the comparisons that can be made between two cases, and then choose your relevant facts. So for instance, if the FRQ asks you to compare Brown versus Board of Education, you'll need a description that includes something about it being a case about a young girl, or if you know or remember Linda Brown, the young girl that's in the case, who was not allowed to attend a whites only school and was therefore denied the equal protection of the law. Note that my choice of facts brings in the most likely constitutional clause and principle that could be used. And then you would need to then proceed to a comparison that could be used. You would then, with this comparison of the required case, you would provide information about and compare the two, and make sure you stay focused on the relevant facts, or rather the relevant constitutional clause and principle as you compare the two cases. Now, what was the ruling in the case and the reasoning behind that ruling? All right, so this portion is, you need to know the ruling in the required case, because part of what you will be comparing are the outcomes in the two cases that you're working with. So the prompt will give you directions as to whether you're deciding similarity or difference. And so you have to know how the court ruled in the required case and why it ruled that way, so that you can make the comparison to the case you were given in the FRQ. It's very important that you read the prompt carefully to see if they want your response to focus more on reasoning or for the decisions on the outcome. Now, the last part of the question is going to ask you, how would this ruling impact public policy, government actions as a result of the ruling? So here is where you really need to know how the required case impacted the implementation of a policy in America. So who is affected most and how? So here's where you want to examine the required cases as you review and look up some of the information if you don't already know it. So let's continue now with our Brown example. All right, how did this impact policy at the national level? So if we're talking national level, remember we're talking at the federal level. It could say, how did it impact at the state level and why? Or how did the public react to the ruling? You could have a question of what branches of government responded and how did they respond? How did the states respond? And was there then a federal response? So you won't be writing all of these things out, but instead you're going to be asked a question, and you're going to have to know a little bit of what happened in that required case. So the last part will ask you about actions that could be taken by various political institutions or actors, or even a Lincoln's institution or the public. By knowing the aftermath of the required case, it will help you reason out the potential aftermath of the comparison case. This will also assessing how well you know lawful and legitimate actions that can be taken. And I need to stress the importance here. Don't put in your response that people are going to riot or burn down buildings, etc. The question is hinging most likely always on a lawful response. It's not going to ask you something that would be unlawful. And so you need to make sure that you stay in the confines of what is lawful and a legitimate action. All right, so at this point, I've talked for a good little bit, so let's take a break, and I want you to begin drawing a line to connect the constitutional clause or principle to the required SCOTUS case. Okay, so it looks like several of you have studied these already, uh, or have studied them, or currently studying them now. So good job there. All right, so the first one we're going to start with is U.S. versus Lopez. U.S. versus Lopez. Connects to the Interstate Commerce Clause. Brown versus Board of Education. This is going to connect over here to the Equal Protection Clause. McCullough versus Maryland is the Supremacy Clause. And it is also the Elastic Clause. Schenck or Schnick versus the United States is going to be the Free Speech Clause. Engel versus Vitale is going to be your Establishment Clause case. Wisconsin v. Yoder is going to be your free exercise. And last but not least, Gideon is right to counsel. All right, I hope you are feeling good about those. We are going to next look at the remaining cases. All right, so here we've got Marbury versus Madison, Baker versus Carr, Tinker versus Des Moines, New York Times versus the United States, Shaw versus Reno, Citizens United versus the FEC, and McDonald versus Chicago. Okay, so looks like we are still working. See a couple of us that have. All right, Marbury versus Madison. we're going to start with this one. This one is going to have two. So it's going to be jurisdiction of the courts. And then it's also going to be the supremacy clause way down here. And the other twofer that we have tonight is Baker versus Carr. This also deals with jurisdiction of courts to review cases, as well as the equal protection clause. Tinker. Tinker is a case all about your rights in school to protest, and that's going to be down here with the free speech clause. New York Times is going to be freedom of press. Shaw versus Reno is going to be equal protection clause. McDonald is going to be the due process clause of the 14th Amendment. And that means that Citizens United also deals with free speech. All right. So some of us did really well on this. Some of us are still filling it out. If you did not do as well as you wanted, that's fine. We're going to get you to a position where you're feeling really comfortable with these tonight. All right, so in this section here, what we're going to do, and let me clear my drawings, I apologize. In this section, we're going to be connecting constitutional principles to the relevant cases. And this is going to, so what you're going to do here is each one of these prompts is a piece from the case. And here we want to know how to provide facts of the case. And so we just want you to circle yes or no for thumbs up. This is a really good example of facts from the case, or thumbs down. No, this is not a really good one. Okay, so initial glance here, looks like a lot of us are getting this right off the bat. So this first one, President Nixon tried to stop two national newspapers from publishing materials belonging to a classified Department of Defense study regarding the history of U.S. activities in Vietnam. The president argued that prior restraint was necessary to protect national security. All right, if you circled the green thumbs up, you are correct. Is anyone able to tell me what facts this first example belongs to? What case does this belong to? Anybody? Ethan, what case is that?
The New York Times versus the United States.
Yes, good job. Thank you, sir. You are correct. All right. The second one here, a member of the Old Order Amish religion believed that a state law was unconstitutional. All right, based on what I'm seeing, almost all of us got this correct. That would be a thumbs down here. All right, that is a thumbs down. This one really is, it's just not enough. It's not enough from the example. what more do you think needs to be provided to make this be enough? Does anybody have an idea of what we would need to say in addition or add to it to make it correct? Any guesses? Anybody want to take a stab at this? All right, that's okay. So in order to make number 2 here more correct, you would need to talk about either compulsory or required school attendance, and that the Yoders are arguing that the compulsory and required school attendance violates their religious expression. All right, the last one down here at the bottom, Lopez brought a concealed weapon, a handgun, to school. He was charged with a violation of the Gun-Free School Zones Act, which was a federal law. Lopez argued that the GFSZA was an overreach of the Commerce Clause. And it looks like a lot of you circled that as green, and we are correct. Does anyone know what case this last one belongs to here? Good job. That is US versus Lopez. Great job, guys. All right. Continuing. All right, so some more facts for us to look at here. We've got another round, so let's see what we can do here. Okay, so right off the bat here, I'm seeing some really good answers. Yeah, so this first one, students wore black armbands at school to protest the Vietnam War and were suspended. Their parents sued the school system, arguing this was a violation of their free speech rights under the First Amendment. That is enough. That is a green check, so good job. Anybody know what case this is from? All right. Yeah, Tinker versus Des Moines. Yes, yes, yes. Good job. All right. Number 2, Congress chartered a national bank with branches in the states. Maryland taxed the national bank. When a bank officer refused the tax, Maryland tried him for violating state laws. When challenged, Maryland argued that the creation of a bank was not an express power of Congress and therefore it was unconstitutional. If you circled the green thumbs up, you are correct. Anybody have a guess on what case this is from? Not Marbury versus Maryland. All right. Oh, there we go. Yes, good job. McCullough versus Maryland. McCullough versus Maryland. Great job. All right. Last but not least, Marbury was appointed to a federal judgeship by the outgoing president, John Adams, which the new president, Thomas Jefferson, refused to deliver. All right. If you circled the red thumbs down, that is definitely correct. We definitely need some more information there. So here, there is more than one potential constitutional issue in the case, depending on which case is chosen for comparison. So if the issue is about jurisdiction of the court and judicial review, then the facts of the case would need to include something about the ability of the court to review the law in question that would give them the authority to do what Marbury wanted them to do. At a minimum, the description should likely include information about the fact that Marbury was seeking a writ of mandamus or an order of the court directing the new president to deliver his commission. All right, how are we feeling about these facts? Looks like based on what I've seen so far that we're feeling pretty good. Okay, so next we're gonna kind of transition a little bit here, and we're gonna talk about connecting a SCOTUS ruling to a policy implementation. So responses here, this is going to be when we're talking about policy implementation, we're talking about connecting this. This is going to be found in that last part of the SCOTUS FRQ. So this is going to be in part C. And this is going to probably make you speculate about how some group of people would react to the ruling in the comparison case. So it's going to most likely ask you about the comparison case rather than the required case. You want to make sure you use proper nouns when you're discussing actors, processes, institutions. Pronouns can leave the reader in doubt that you know what or who you're writing about. And you definitely want to make sure that you include an action verb accurately, that you show what powers or tactics the relevant political actor is exercising. So for instance, passing a new law or filing a lawsuit. So the action verb there is passing or filing. You want to respond to the fourth objective for this disciplinary practice. So, we're going to be explaining how required Supreme Court cases apply to scenarios and context. So if it asked you about the legislative branch, all right, what is the main job of the legislative branch? What does the legislative branch do? What is their big overarching power? Anybody? It's fine. All right. So the legislative branch makes laws. So you might respond with an answer that reflects the boundaries of how they can legitimately do this. Remember that the courts are reviewing the Constitution, and so they would have to amend the offending law. And they could also propose a constitutional amendment, but make sure your response in that instance reflects an understanding that constitutional amendments require the participation of the states to ratify them. Sorry about that. Now, the executive branch. If you get a question about the executive branch, this is hinging on what is the job of the executive branch? That is to enforce laws, not make laws, but enforce laws. So here you would need to have some discretion in how and even they would do this, and whether they would they might even choose to enforce a Supreme Court decision. So some good examples that you could talk about: Andrew Jackson's response to Worcester versus Georgia. That's an 1830 case where John Marshall said, or basically made his decision. Now let him enforce it. Alternatively, after the Brown versus Board of Education case, President Eisenhower sent troops to escort the Little Rock Nine to classes for an entire school year to enforce desegregation. C, if it talks about state versus federal. So here, if the ruling overturns a state law, it might be actions that states can take that would be similar to those of Congress. Now, any response should show an understanding of federalism and the supremacy clause. So a pro tip here: if you're going to talk about the legislative branch in a state, you need to indicate that you understand what the term legislature is. Because remember, state legislative bodies are generally going to be called legislatures or legislators, where, our on a federal level, we're calling them congressmen or women, House members or Senate members. So it's important that you hinge on that. Using the term Congress when describing a state legislative action will signal to the reader that you do not know what you're talking about. It may seem to be something that's picky, but this reflects an understanding of the powers of each level of government. And so it might be important for you to, try to remember that legislature is state level, Congress is federal level. Now, D could get into a variety of interesting places with linkage institutions. So, the most common linkage institution interactions that might be appropriate to answer this portion of the question would be interest groups or political parties. And this will likely require you to discuss specific tactics that these groups could use that would influence the implementation of a SCOTUS ruling or change in a policy. So it could even be, potentially ask you how an interest group or how interest group, could influence the ruling that occurred. So some options here might be, supporting defendants by helping them pay for the cost of bringing a case before the court. It could be that the Brown versus Board of Education is a good example where the NAACP sought out defendants that they could help to challenge separate but equal laws. All right, and then last but not least, E, the public. So if the question asks about the public and how they could respond to the case, whether they agree or disagree, make sure you choose actions that are reasonable and lawful. The public could write their elected officials. They could peacefully protest. They could elect different officials to positions of power. You need to make sure that your choice of action is a logical response and it's legal. I cannot stress enough that you must think about what kinds of actions can be lawfully taken by any group within the range of powers that are reasonably assigned to that group or institution. Rioting would never be an appropriate response to this part of the prompt. While people might react in that way, the reader for this exam are looking for you to show an understanding of the lawful actions that can be taken or the powers that can be reasonably and appropriately exercised by a group or institution in question. All right, so how might this look? All right, so first of all, these are just examples of the way that questions might present part C. All right, even though at this point we do not know or do not have enough of an excerpt that any of these respond to, let's try to think about how or what the appropriate institution or political actor could respond to any ruling. All right. And when you're answering or replying to these, if you will, try to label them A, B, C, D, or E. All right, if you're struggling on where to begin with this, let's try answering one of the prompts that I have in a color here, A, B, or E. Okay, so on this first one, describe an action that citizens who disagree with the holding um, could take to limit its impact. So on this question, we're looking for citizens, something that citizens can do. So remember, you don't want to talk about what the legislature could do, what the president could do. You want to talk about what citizens can do. All right, and that's something that's important to keep in mind here. You know, an easy one to go with: citizens could simply write a letter to their congressman. They could, you know, seeking change. I saw a couple of responses that said, you know, that citizens could exercise their right to vote for new officials who will change the law. You know, citizens could also protest as well. In B, let's talk about B now. So B says describe an action that the Ohio legislature could take in response to this decision. So here we want to know what a state level legislature could do. All right, so you know the Ohio legislature, they can legislate. So their response should talk about writing laws that would address this situation. Um, All right, finally, part E, describe an action that the president of the United States could take to respond to the decision in Tennant versus the Jefferson County Commission if he or she disagreed with the decision. All right, so I saw a lot of responses that talked about executive orders, which is really good. So you know, the president can write an executive order that directs the Justice Department to enforce a SCOTUS ruling in a less robust manner than it might be called for. They could also choose to ignore the ruling or refuse to enforce it. They could also use the bully puppet. Um, to sway public opinion in support of whatever action they do take. And so there you could talk about, you know, the State of the Union address, the president using other means to try to sway support in a different way. All right. So we're going to move on now. So what should I be able to do? All right. So FRQ3, the SCOTUS comparison, is going to be where you're going to compare a non-required Supreme Court case with a required Supreme Court case, explaining how information from the required case is relevant to the non-required. And so the question is it's gonna look something like this. It's going to have where you're going to need to identify a similarity or difference, describe the details, explaining a similarity. Now, what we need to remember here are the verbs. All right, so identify. That identify is, you know, you could occasionally bullet point identify questions, but you're really going to be better served to write a complete sentence. And with identify, this is asking you to specifically name something. All right. What was the name of your presenter tonight? Or what color shirt was your presenter wearing? So you're having to identify something there. Describe. So a describe question is asking you to paint a picture so that the reader can see what you're describing without the benefit of having an actual picture. All right. So often describe questions also need an identifier as part of the description. So always write incomplete sentences. A description can often be accomplished with 1 to 2 sentences per item. So how did you get to school today? All right, I drove in a car. That would be identify. I've identified how I got to school. Describing how I got to school, I left my house at 7 a.m. I drove approximately 13 miles, parked in the parking lot, and walked in the building. All right, I've now described how I got there in detail. I've painted a picture of how I got to work. Explain. So explain is going to be a question asking for you to explain a couple of things. It could be something about explain how. Explain how the teacher got to work. Explain why the student went to school. Explain what the student was doing on the way to school. Explain where the school is, or explain who is at school. So its effect on the stimulus of the question. And so this will usually require 3 to 5 sentences in order to adequately explain and make connections that they're asking you to do. So examples are a wonderful thing to include here. It often helps to seal the deal on whether the reader knows you know what you're talking about, if your writing leaves them with any confusion. All right. Now, how and why they lead us to very different parts of the political process and motivations. All right. So the word how and why can lead us to different parts. So pay close attention to that little adverb. If the question says explain how, all right, explain how is going to ask you to describe a process or power and the mechanics of it. All right, explain why. They're looking for motivations. All right. All right, so how will this be scored? All right, so the scoring here is you're going to get 1 point for being able to identify the clause or principle that is similar or different to the 2 cases. Now, in B1, all right, you are going to need to provide prompted information from the specific required Supreme Court case. So B1 is all about the facts of that required case. All right, now B2 is where you're going to have to explain how or why that information is relevant to the second source that's provided in question. So in order to earn the second point, all right, the response must correctly relate specific information from the required source to a news source. So if all you give us is facts of the required case and you move on and you answer C, you're going to lose a second point. All right, so it's very important that you remember that B is worth 2 points. All right, you get 1 point for being able to drop all the facts you know about the required case, and you get a second point for being able to compare or contrast the 2 cases. And then you can get a third point, or really, excuse me, a fourth point for answering part C. So to earn this point, the response must demonstrate a grasp of the appropriate enduring understanding. All right. In a moment, we're gonna put this in student pace mode for about 10 minutes. Once we get there, it's going to be important that you should read through the case description on the next slide, that you have the ability to annotate it. So you can draw on it if you want. You don't have to annotate it, but you can if you certainly want to. When you're ready and you have read the prompt thoroughly, we want you to move on from there, and you'll be answering A, B, and C. All right, so when they reach the slide with the stop sign, they should return back to the original slide that says ready, set, go. But guys, take your time, work through it. We're going to be here um, to look at your responses and give you some really good feedback tonight. So let's get ready. All right, if you will, take another couple of minutes and keep working. It looks like a majority of you are have moved from part A and are finishing up part C now, so that is really good. Keep working if that is something that you're on. I see that a handful of you have gone back to slide, saying that you're ready to move on. So thank you again, and keep working if that is something that you're still doing. Now, on part C, part C is asking you to describe an action that members of Congress who agreed with this holding in U.S. versus Virginia could take to expand educational opportunities for women. So here you would need to have an understanding that Congress could support the decision of the court by writing legislation that would protect and expand educational opportunities for women. A really good example would be Title 9, Title 9, which actually predates this decision. So, this is an example that could be an excellent way to really show to the reader that you, the student, has a really good understanding of the case and the appropriate powers or processes that have been asked to describe or explain here. All right, so Title IX, if you're not familiar with what that is, that's found as part of the Department of Education's in their Office of Civil Rights, and Title IX protects people from discrimination based on sex in education programs or activities that receive federal financial assistance. So no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation and be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. So that's something to kind of keep in mind here. I think we are starting to see some really good responses come in for part C. So, this could be something talking about the bureaucracy. All right. The bureaucracy could write regulations or connect more conditions for federal funding to the states, to the enforcement of the court's decision and applicable laws passed by Congress to protect the equal protection for women. All right. So I'm gonna stop the student pace mode at this point and use what time we have left to kind of just quickly talk through the prompts with you. So part A is asking for you to identify the common clause here. And so with this non-required case that you were given, and of course the required case being Brown versus Board of Education, this wanted you to identify the equal protection clause of the 14th Amendment. And reading through a lot of y'all's responses, I saw that tonight. It's a really good job there. Part B, remember, the very first thing that you have to do in Part B is you need to give us the facts of the required case. So you need to tell us about the Brown versus Board of Education case before you do anything with constitutional clauses or talking about the other case. So at minimum, you would need to say that the decision led to equal opportunities in education for African-American students using the Equal Protection Clause. And then for comparison, you would need to elaborate on how the VMI case expands this equal protection to women 40 years later using a progression that shows understanding of both cases. All right. All right, so we have some sample multiple choice questions that we want you to try to take a stab at tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and throw the first one up. And I see a couple of you have already started answering these. But which of the following is the best interpretation of the political cartoon? Sorry about that. I did not have my computer charger with me and looked down and my computer was on 4%. Okay. Can we all still hear me? Hopefully that's the case. All right, so seeing some responses here. If you marked members of Congress receive political contributions from many special interests, you are correct. All right. The next question, which following Supreme Court cases is most related to the topic of the cartoon? Okay. I am very impressed to see that all of us know what this is. Good job. This is Citizens United versus the Federal Elections Commission. Great job. Okay, so the final question here, which is, which of the following best describes the holding in Baker versus Carr? All right, this one is going to be A. Unequal representation of citizens in legislative districts is unconstitutional and may be reviewed by the courts. All right, so we are almost down to the end here. So we would like to know, did you find this lesson interesting or challenging? Was it too hard, just right, too easy? Select the icon where you want it to go. And at the very end, you're going to get a chance to take a survey for us, and that's going to be really helpful. And we're also going to be able to share that information out. You'll receive a copy of this presentation and responses after we end the session tonight. So again, thank you so much for being a part of this, and I'm going to move on to that last slide now. All right, should y'all need anything, I'm Mr. Sweeney, and my other co-presenter tonight was Ms. Schaefer. So if you need anything at all, don't hesitate to reach out. Jane, are you still there?
We're the only two.
All right.
left.
I just moved them. I just moved them to the waiting room.
Yeah, I
hadn't
had
seen
moved
them.
one of them. I was double check. Although at this point don't even need to anymore. To see if they're ones who were participating.
Yeah, I didn't see some of them. I didn't